the jihadi parties are publicly accepting that their attempt to govern has failed really, and it's time for somebody else to take over.
I think if they have not explicitly admitted to this reality, the past experience and the failure of the previous governments proves that reality. And further to your question as far as the United Nations is concerned, we have always expressed the hope that Dr. Hall will visit Afghanistan. It has been a matter of surprise to us that I have not met Dr. Hall for the last more than 13, 14 months. Although I have expressed my readiness to meet Dr. Hall and to submit some facts and realities which would help him in discharging his responsibility. One of the points which Dr. Hall has always been insisting is the convening of talks and negotiations and conferences in Pakistan. Pakistan does not seem to be a neutral ground for the convening of inter-Afghan dialogue, nor the conferences of what Mr. Ghafoorzai, Foreign Minister of Pakistan, stated 2 days ago, of a conference of 5 countries to be attended by the Russian Federation and the United States as observers, to be held in Pakistan. Pakistan, based upon what they have shown, seems to be a hostile ground for the conduct of inter-Afghan dialogue as well as for any conferences on Afghanistan. We believe that Dr. Hall could find a more neutral ground for the convening of any conference which would be held for the purpose of putting an end to the conflict. The Foreign Minister of Pakistan also emphasized on their recognition of the Taliban, a non-existent government, as many international news media put it. It is a matter of surprise that with this kind of a stand, still Pakistan believed that they would be in a position to play a constructive role for bringing peace to Afghanistan, while supporting one side involved in the conflict.
Can I just check one thing? The Loya Jirga within 6 to 9 months, is that dependent on the Taliban entering negotiations, or will you convene the Loya Jirga even if the situation has not changed substantively from where it is now?
I think there is a dire need on the part of the people of Afghanistan for bringing peace to the country. I'm sure that even if the Taliban reject negotiations and cooperation for the convening of the Loya Jirga, there would be many commanders, religious and national figures from the territories presently under the occupation of Taliban. If in case by the time of the convening of the Loya Jirga, these territories still remain under the authority of Taliban, to join the efforts for the convening of the Loya Jirga. However, my expectation is that by the time we reach to convene under the supervision of the United Nations, the Loya Jirga, everybody will jointly and collectively exert efforts to convene a Loya Jirga, which would find the final answers to the questions.
On the demilitarization of Kabul, the Taliban say that Kabul is already demilitarized. It's one Taliban spokesman described to me as an
This response by the Taliban itself shows and demonstrates the degree of their resoluteness in order to continue to occupy Kabul through military means. If you go to Kabul and speak with the ordinary people, if we all believe in democracy and human rights as two precious principles and values, so then we have to find out what is the will of the people of Kabul, whether they would be willing to accept the rule of Taliban, or they will support the demilitarization of Kabul and entrusting a security force with the responsibility of maintaining the security of the capital.
The idea of a neutral security force has always been a problematic one in Afghanistan, to say the least. How on earth do you expect to convene a neutral security force in this country where everyone is armed and very partisan?
There has been some alternative solution to this problem in the past. One of the alternative solution was to procure the force from a neutral Islamic country. For instance, Bangladesh was at one time in a position to commit itself to send 5,000 contingent for the security of a demilitarized capital. I think this idea would still be worth considering. So this is also one of the options. If achieving or reaching a consensus on the idea of establishing a security force, neutral security force, from the conflicting sides or from within Afghanistan, so there is another possibility of calling upon a neutral Islamic country to procure this force.
You were citing security measures as in connection to UN flights. Could you describe the security measures why the landing rights were not given?
When I refer to the security measures, I meant that for the first couple of 3-4 days after the collapse of the Taliban from Mazar-e-Sharif, I think it was a wise decision to postpone issuing of permits for the flights to Mazar-e-Sharif. I could assure you that there has been no political purpose involved behind delaying the permit. I could assure you now that as soon as the United Nations is in a position to send the head of the special mission or other members of the special mission, we would be in a position to issue permits, and more than that, we would be very much ready to welcome the United Nations delegations and flights to Mazar-e-Sharif.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't get it. I mean, ICRC is allowed to land, United Nations cannot land. I mean, where's the difference?
As I stated, I once again would like to repeat it, that there is no other reason involved in delaying the permit issued to the United Nations. I could assure you now that as soon as the United Nations decides to send their mission or their flights, they will be welcome to come to Mazar-e-Sharif. The International Red Cross, even at the time of conflict, they frequently fly just to provide humanitarian assistance to the wounded and to the other people needed, who are in need of assistance. So the case of the United Nations is different than the ICRC.
The insurance price for a UN member is very, very high, very expensive.
But you don't pay the insurance, no?
I didn't say that.
قیام مردم در مزار شریف اغلب مردم ناراضی بودن از سازمان ملل و سازمان ملل رو به دخالت در امور افغانستان و حمایت از طالبان محکوم میکردن. جلو مراکز ملل متحد شعار میدادن و حتی چند تا از فرماندهان ارشد طالبان از جمله ملا سراج الدین خود شخصا اعلام کرد که ما در قندهار، هرات و کابل شاهد بودیم که ملل متحد مردم رو تجهیز میکرده، البته به صورت آشکار نه، برای مردم رو پول میداده، به فرماندهان کمک میکرده که به اصطلاح تجهیز بشن و برای اشغال شمال وارد عمل بشن. نظر شما در اینجا چی هست؟
مثلا شما میکنیم سوال دیگه نتونستم شما میگوشید.
The question is that in the occupation of Mazar Sharif there had been some demonstrations in front of the United Nations office, and there were some from among the people who used to blame the United Nations for having a direct or indirect role in arming some of the people in order to bring about to ensure the occupation of Taliban, occupation of Mazar Sharif by the Taliban. You want to know my reaction? I do not think it is this kind of concern is acknowledged. The United Nations should not and cannot have a role for the exacerbation of the conflict. Rather, the United Nations should play a positive role for bringing an end to the conflict. There has been some degree of displeasure by people, ordinary people on the street, about the lack of enthusiasm on the part of the United Nations to identify the Pakistanis, especially after the capturing of more than 300-400 Pakistanis in Mazar Sharif and some other areas. I would like to further add that when we submitted a figure of 420 Pakistanis, they are only those Pakistanis who speak English and Urdu. The Pashto-speaking Pakistanis would be close to 1,000, according to the figures that we have received from the members of the United Front. So there has been some degree of displeasure by the people who have expressed displeasure from the United Nations, that the United Nations was expected, it was the people of Afghanistan who expected the United Nations to courageously question and criticize the Pakistani authorities for having their personnel involved in the conflict.
And this displeasure is shared by you?
I think we have had occasions that we have expressed a kind of displeasure to the United Nations for delaying the visit by at least a member of UNSMA to the areas where we have Pakistani prisoners. The United, as I mentioned, the resolution dated 17 December 1996, and especially the 1076 resolution of the Security Council, calls upon the United Nations Special Mission for Afghanistan to report on the political as well as military situation of Afghanistan. This mandate requires the Special Mission of the United Nations to come visit to Afghanistan and report about the Pakistani prisoners of war.
So you're accusing the United Nations of not doing their job properly?
We are not accusing the United Nations, but we are expressing our expectation from the United Nations.